we cross over to Kenya. The Republic of Kenya, as we speak, is now in political transition. William Arap Ruto, Deputy President of Kenya since 2013, will now have the opportunity to serve his tenure as President of East Africa's biggest economy. The apex court of the country on Monday actually upheld the validity of Ruto's election despite a protest from Raila Odinga, who's one of the contenders in the just ended presidential race. In his address to the nation, outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta noted that the transition processes have already started. He's also urging the rule of law to prevail.
Fellow Kenyans, on the 9th of August of 2022, Kenyans participated in an election that ushered in new leaders at all levels of our governance realm. Following a dispute in the presidential election, a petition was filed in our Supreme Court for determination of validity of the results, and the Supreme Court has today pronounced itself on this matter. When I was sworn in as your president, I made a pledge to the country, a pledge to uphold the rule of law and the decisions made by the judiciary on all matters appertaining to our governance. Today, the Supreme Court made a ruling on the presidential dispute, upholding the results announced by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission on the 15th of August, 2022. And in keeping to the pledge that I made to uphold the rule of law when I took the oath of office, I commit to executing the orders of this court to the letter. The process of handing over is in progress through the Assumption of Office Committee, which actually has already begun its work as of August 10th, 2022. And indeed, it is my intention to oversee a smooth transition to the next administration, and all the necessary orders to facilitate this process have already been issued.
So that's the position of the president. Meanwhile, the Kenyan High Commission says this is a milestone in deepening Kenya's democracy, obviously hoping that this would bring to finality the processes before, during, and after the presidential election. So what's next for Ruto, and what's also the future of Kenya's democracy? Joining us on this conversation is Lex Manyasi, policy analyst and political commentator as well. We also do have Aggrey Mutambo, his news editor, The East African. Aggrey is joining us via Zoom, and Arnold Maliba as well as a political analyst joining us on this conversation. Let me start off with you, Aggrey, on this. It appears that a lot of reactions have been greeting this statement from the president, but what more do we know about Raila Odinga and his thoughts on the Supreme Court's verdict?
Thank you very much. Mr. Odinga issued a statement yesterday to say that he disagrees with the decision of the court, but he will respect it because he has a tradition of respecting the rule of law and the decisions of the court, and having himself benefited from decisions of the very court in the past. But as of now, we do not know whether he will continue with the politics of opposition or whether he will retire. Obviously, retirement is something the president-elect wishes Mr. Odinga to do. But for now, he has said he will issue a statement later to state what exactly his next step will be.
This has got to do with democracy, and the citizens must have their say on this. What's the feel and the mood in Kenya as we speak?
Well, this election was very tight, and as you may expect, there's one half of the voters who say they are disappointed with the decision of the court, while there's another one which says it's excited, it feels vindicated that their person, who is President-elect William Ruto, has been vindicated as the winner of the election as announced by the Electoral Commission. So as of now, we have sort of one half which is happy and another half which is sad. But something good about this is that there has been no violence as we had seen in the past. So this may mean maybe some maturity of sort, or just people accepting that the court has made a fair decision.
I agree, I'll come to you shortly, but Lex, the fallout from yesterday's speech by the president is what many have been questioning. The fact that he's remained silent on mentioning the name of his deputy president. Is that how deep-seated the animosity between the two individuals are, and how will that feed into the political transition process that we're witnessing now?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me this evening. So if you look at the president's body language, and we just watched him speak, it's very obvious that that's not the president that we know. He must have been reading that speech out of the fact that he had made a commitment to hand over power and to hand over smoothly. However, if you think about the months that led into the election, you will know that his preferred candidate, of course, was not the current president-elect. And therefore, to hand over power to someone that both of you are aware was not like your preferred candidate. That's where the biggest challenge is. But having said that, I guess in terms of responsibility, it's important to realize that Kenya, I think, has come a long way to get to a point where you can say that things have not gone my way, but I'll still respect the decisions that have been made, whether I agree with those decisions or not. That's something that we are proud of. To see the president that is outgoing actually agree that he will hand over power is something that was on everybody's mind. Nobody was going to like, we did not think that he was going to hand over power that smoothly. So it's a good thing for purposes of democracy that you can disagree, but at the same time, when it comes to your responsibilities, you should perform them as required.
And we're getting the official communication from the High Commission here in Accra, indicating that this court process will bring finality to the presidential race. Is that the same feeling in Kenya?
Yeah, so if you think about the process that Kenya has gone through from the year 2010, when we promulgated the new constitution, of course, we have had a few challenges here and there. We have had a few hiccups in terms of our electoral processes. Our systems have kept improving. If you think about the Electoral Commission, for example, the nullification of the last elections led to a few tightening of loopholes within the electoral systems. And so the handing over power, for example, under the Constitution has been defined even more clearly in terms of time, in terms of place, in terms of the how. And so our democracy in terms of the way the systems work in Kenya, we are almost at a point where it's possible to predict what is going to happen in different political processes. That doesn't mean that we are out of the woods yet. There are a few things like, for example, the electoral, the judge's verdict is going to be out within 21 days. to see exactly what they'll have said. My expectation and my thinking is that there are a few things they're going to point out as things that we still need to do. And therefore, we expect the next election, for example, to even be better than this election.
And Aggrey, this is where I want to bring you in. The issue about Raila Odinga, the perception out there, particularly for those of us who are out of Kenya, is as though he doesn't have a room in governance and public discourse when it comes to the affairs of Kenya. Is this the time for William Ruto to at least give him that opportunity, which he has been denied by the Kenyan people?
Well, the court may have resolved a legal problem on whether Deputy President William Ruto will ascend to power. But what remains unresolved is the political problem, which is what do you do with the people who lose elections, especially in a very tight contest like this one that we just had. So this is one of the things that people are saying, that the deputy president, once he ascends to power as a new leader, will he lead the country with one half opposing him and one half supporting him? He may learn from his predecessor, who did a handshake with Mr. Odinga and gave him some informal role, which was to be like, should I say, an influencer for his government projects. And it seemed to work very well. The only problem was it sidelined his deputy president, a man he had promised to hand over power to after he finishes his own, as per the political pact they reached in 2013. So back to your question, yes, Mr. Ruto has said he will not have a handshake, but the political pressure that he might face for him to govern properly without hindrances, he may have to reach across to the other side of the divide and see how they can work together. And so politically, that is going to be something they must do.
Is this the end of the road for the famous opposition leader?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Based on the age, yes, you might say so. But in the past, he has shed his skin and come back as a very strong politician. Here in Nairobi, we call him an enigma because when he appears to have lost everything, he usually turns around his fortunes and just becomes a very influential politician. So we expect that he will still play some political role in the future. As to whether he will vie again for presidency, it is not something we can know for now, especially given his age.
And Alex, I want to pick on a statement also made by the president-elect, William Ruto, talking about the fact that we're not enemies, we're Kenyans first. That's an instructive statement to be hearing from the president-elect, giving a sense that Kenya may be moving into an area or a regime of unity and stability in terms of your democracy. You agree?
That's something that is expected from, because you see, constitutionally, the president is supposed to serve as the symbol of national unity. And therefore, that is expected to be said of the president, because then that is the only way that you can grow the country. Whether that is matched with action in terms of like bringing on board the former prime minister, that's a different discussion altogether. But what we have seen in the recent past, for example, is that he has already reached out to some of the people that members of parliament that were on the other side, even though he said that they actually belonged to his side from the word go. So that is an indication, for example, that he will somehow need to reach out, because like my colleague said, that parliament, for instance, is almost 50-50. So how do you, for example, get a speaker of the National Assembly without, on a 50-50 basis, you need to reach out? How do you get bills passed in Parliament? He has an agenda to deliver as he had promised the electorate. And so he will need a lot of backing in Parliament, especially in the National Assembly, for him to pass bills that will then translate into backing up his agenda for implementation. So what I see is that it's a responsibility that he has to take on. somehow. And therefore, we expect a lot of that to continue happening, whether we will see it pronounced or not, but behind the scenes, that will continue.
And the man in question here, William Ruto, many of us know him to be the deputy president, yes, but then it's as though he's just shown up from nowhere and then has taken over power. Is that a correct notion to have, Alex?
So William Ruto, the man, from your description, he may have showed up from nowhere because his name is not on the charts. His parents are unknown. His history was basically unknown. But if you look at the political history of William Ruto, the man, he has been in the political circles for quite a while. Actually, one of the things that is unique about the current president, the incoming president,
right,
is that he has never lost an election. And he has never, if you look at the way he was, I think, a cabinet minister at the age of 30. So it's a journey that he has undertaken with a lot of vigor and energy. If you think about it in terms of his capacity to go for what he wants, that's something that he is in him. So I would want to say that without contradiction, that it's his capacity and energy probably is what has brought him this far.
How about experience? Because I'm also on the lookout for experience and what is bringing on board anyway.
So that depends on how you look at it in terms of what experience means, because he's been a cabinet minister for quite some time. He has been a deputy president for 10 years. Some of us, like myself, have argued that in the first 5 years, it was William Ruto who was running government. I have said that quite a few times because of many reasons. And so if you talk about experience, probably he understands how government runs much more than what people will expect or will think. How that translates into how he's going to perform is something that we need to wait and see.
I agree. The point about his cabinet and how it's looking like. Would this be a clear departure from the Uhuru days?
Well, there are a number of things that can give us a hint. For example, the people who are close to him during campaigns. In most cases, our politicians reward those who have helped them get the votes. But legally, he must have at least a third of that cabinet who are women. So we expect that there will be women in that cabinet, not just because it's a legal requirement, but because he also had some people who are influential in that campaign who are women. He may also try to appoint people from political movements that were initially opposed to him. Going by yesterday's statements, he has said that some of those politicians chose to oppose him because they were pressured to do so, but they were with him from the start. So we expect that this kind of composition will form his cabinet in the next few days. Usually, they name the cabinet a few days after they're sworn in. So we are looking forward to it.
And so let's get to the constitutional process now. What are we to expect in terms of the timelines, and what's the next issue that may come up in terms of the political appointments? Alex was just talking, for instance, about the selection of the Speaker for the National Assembly. That's also coming up strongly.
Yes, Parliament is resuming sittings. There are first sittings of this since the elections this Thursday. So we expect a strong contest for the National Assembly. Like Alex said, this Parliament is almost 50-50, and the winner must get at least 2/3 majority of the National Assembly, and at the same time, the winner of the Speaker for the Senate must get the same. If no one gets that kind of vote tally, then it means they will go several rounds until someone emerges a clear winner. And so usually, as it happened in the past, there's a lot of horse trading, compromises and pledges to be met so that people can drop out of the race for the winner to come. So far, both coalitions have fronted very strong men, and we expect that before one of them wins, it is going to be that horse trading to happen.
And if there's anything unique about this
And
year's
then,
election, yes, okay, just land on that briefly.
Yeah, and then of course the biggest thing is the inauguration next week on Tuesday. Based on the law, the new president is supposed to be sworn in 7 days after the decision of the court. And then after he takes power, then we expect the cabinet to be named and other government operations. Probably he might try to change the policy, economic policy. The current administration focused a lot on infrastructure and had good relations with the Chinese, for example. We do not know whether he will pursue the same policy, but he has said that he will focus on the grassroots economic policy,
Right. And
which may mean that.
Yes, and in fact, it was one of the issues I was about talking on, the issue of the foreign policy and what posture he may pursue going forward. But just touch on this point for me, Aggrey, and then I'll bring in Alex and also take your thoughts on that. The issue about how unique this time round. We've seen your election run smoothly and arguably in a very peaceful manner. Am I correct to have that assessment of the exercise?
Yes, this is probably the most peaceful elections in 15 years. The only other election that we had a very good transition of was in 2002 when the handover and the politicking was quite peaceful. And so based on this, it may be his starting point to front an image of a growing democracy for the region, which, as you may know, it's not a very stable place. Somalia, Ethiopia, and all, and South Sudan, we do not have neighbors that have been stable. So probably that is going to be one of his starting points. And then his campaign, he had a mention of strong integration policies. So we expect that he will support regional integration, especially the East African community. And maybe the AFCTA.
Right.
We do not know much about that.
Yeah, in fact, as though you were a prophet, one of the key issues that's on my heart, Alex, and let me bring you in because we're serving as the headquarters for that continental free trade agreement. But even within AIC itself, your East African region has some dissidents, if I may call them as such. For instance, take a look at what the position of Ethiopia is on the AFCFTA. Now that Ruto is taking over, what's going to be, for instance, his influence on the regional community and also extending that all across Africa?
Yeah, to be honest, if there's something that the incoming president will need to work a bit harder is foreign relations. I say that because even when he was serving as deputy president, he may not have been involved a lot in foreign affairs. And so whether we're talking about international trade, regional integration, that will need to come in very strongly. He will need to get fairly competent people to run that docket to support him in that. And so he will need also to delegate quite a bit for that to be done. So what I see is he will need, the good thing is that this country has no shortfall of expertise in terms of supporting that kind of engagement. However, I think he will need to also do a lot of reaching out to foreign presidents, presidents within the region. He will need to reach out a lot to the international community. Those are things that he will need to do quite a bit. That also means that if he's going to take a lot of his time doing that, then he will also need quite strong men at home who believe in his vision, who can implement his agenda in terms of the country. And like, for example, if you think about Raila Odinga, for example, if he became president, it would have been easy to predetermine how he will run his government, right, where his affiliations will be. So that probably is the difference.
Yeah, and that's why I'm interested in finding out as to whether or not he will tilt east or west. Where do you see him leaning on most?
I think it's going to be either. It's a bit difficult to predict because, like I said, If it was Raila Odinga, it would have been easy to predict how his leanings are going to be. For the president-elect, it's a bit difficult to say how he's going to, where he's going to lean, and so it's a wait and see. And I think, in my view, that is going to be largely influenced by where will he get most of his support from? Where is he going to get? Because Kenya is also going through turbulent times in terms of debt. In terms of most of our debts are actually due. And so we were not affected that much by COVID. I say that because having traveled quite a bit on the continent,
right.
I think Kenya is fairly stable. And so it's going to be determined largely by where his support is going to come from. We have seen a lot of congratulations from all over, meaning that allies are ready to work with him.
Okay, we need to be wrapping up, but for you, Aggrey, China is where many say Kenya would have to turn to. You agree, looking at the times in which the West is finding itself?
Yeah, I think it's not easy to dispense with China at the moment because it's one of the biggest bilateral creditors for Kenya. And so whether you like it or not, they have to keep a relationship to sort of arrange the payment plan. As my colleague said, one of the things the president will be forced to do is see how to settle one of the debts that is due in this coming month. So he will find it on the in-tray, and there will be other issues economically, which will need funding, which will need a lot of relations to manage. There are trade negotiations that were pending. He may need to revive. So it's not a question of looking east or west or being neutral, but he will go where the money is, and my bet is he will look for both sides.
Interesting. And I thought that would have been the last one. Alex, just 30 seconds for you. What would be that one key expectation of Ruto?
I think for me, the key expectation is to think about changing the cost of doing business in this country. For me, if he fixed that, it's actually possible to spur the growth of the economy, and therefore it will be easy to actually spread, for example, the tax payer basket, and that will mean then we grow the pie, and that will make it possible for everybody then to contribute and benefit from the same.
Anyway, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I'm grateful, gentlemen, for your time here, Aggrey and Alex, for joining us all the way from Kenya. This is The Pulse on the Joy News Channel.